Daryl here, and this is my daily devotional. If you're not careful when you go to Egypt, you'll stay there longer than you ever intended. Now, Egypt in Scripture often references worldliness. Egypt was a pagan culture. And so, although Pharaoh and the people of Egypt, they appreciated the God of Joseph when he saved them from the famine, but they didn't convert to the God of Joseph. They remained a pagan culture. So we see Jacob coming to Egypt. We see the brothers and all their clans coming to Egypt to be saved during the famine. Jacob dies. They return his bones as promised to Canaan. They come back to Egypt. Now, at some point, the 7-year famine would have been over, and the time would have come for them to return to Canaan, the promised land. But they got too comfortable in Egypt. They stayed in Egypt longer than they should have. Fact is, they overstayed their welcome. Let's read a little. I'm in the last chapter of the book of Genesis, chapter 50. And this is how the book of Genesis ends, verse 22. Joseph stayed in Egypt along with all his father's family. He lived 110 years. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land to the land he promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath and said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up from this place. So that's how the book of Genesis ends. And then you begin the book of Exodus. And in verse 6 of chapter 1, now Joseph and all his brothers and all that generation died. But the Israelites were fruitful and multiplied greatly and became exceedingly numerous. So the land was filled with them. God was fulfilling his promise. They were becoming a great nation out of the one person, Abraham. And now through Jacob, his descendants in Egypt were being multiplied greatly. Verse 8. Then a new king who did not know about Joseph, didn't know about the famine, didn't know about the salvation that came through the God of Joseph. He said, the Israelites have become much too numerous. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous. And if war breaks out, we'll join our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country. So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor. So now we see the descendants of Jacob all becoming slaves in Egypt. They stayed longer than they should have. That's what happens when a person who has the God of Israel stays too long in Egypt. Listen, folks, we are in the world, in Egypt per se. But our eyes have got to be focused on the promised land, on Canaan, on that which we are hoping for. Yes, don't ever lose your hope in heaven. Don't get too comfortable here, or just as these, we become slaves to Egypt. Now, 140 years have passed since the time of Joseph's death. And now we finally see God raising up a leader, Moses, leads them out of the promise, leaves them out of the slavery towards the promised land. And they do take with them the bones of Joseph. You see, the brothers didn't take his bones back to Canaan. It wasn't until 140 years later that they do this. And we see in the book of Joshua, it says to us in Joshua 24 at verse 32, and Joseph's bones, which the Israelites had brought up from Egypt, were buried at Shechem in the tract of land that Jacob bought for 100 pieces of silver. So his bones remained in Egypt for 140 years. before they were finally taken back. Here is the point of the devotional. Do not become so comfortable in the world that you take your eyes off the promised land. God bless you. Good day.